make a roux, which is normally used to thicken gravies, sauces, and soups, melt some butter over medium-high flame in a heavy-bottom saucepan or sauté pan. And to this, you're going to add an equal amount by weight of flour. So the ratio is 1-to-1 butter, flour by weight. And the butter itself doesn't have to be butter. It can be any sort of fat that you want. But clarified butter, even though I'm using whole butter here, is what's traditional. Now, after you cook it together, at about the 2 to 3 minute mark, it's going to be a slight yellowish color. It's going to look just like that. And that's called a white roux, even though it's slightly yellow. And when you cook it a little bit further, probably about the 3 minute mark, it's going to start to turn blonde. And this is a blonde roux, which is the second type of roux. And then the third type of roux is when you cook it even darker and it turns a dark brown and has a nice nutty aroma. And this is a brown roux, which is added to dark sauces and gravies. Now you want to remove your roux to a pan and allow it to cool before incorporating it into your sauce. Now there are a couple of guidelines that you want to take into consideration when making a roux. Number one, you don't ever want to use margarine or shortening for your fat. Margarine and shortening, neither of them have a good flavor, and shortening in particular can give a fuzzy mouthfeel to your sauces. Definitely not what you're going for. You can use clarified butter, oil, or animal fat for the fat in your roux, and animal fat can be anything from duck fat to beef suet to pork fat. And if you're going to be using whole butter, like I demonstrated in this video, remember that it's about 15% water by weight, meaning you'll have to cook the roux slightly longer to evaporate out the extra moisture. Now, a good roux, as far as classic cooking is concerned, has a paste-like consistency and is not pourable. However, the longer you cook roux, the more liquid it will become. Now, when a roux becomes liquid and pourable, it's called a slack roux, and this is commonly done on purpose in Cajun cooking when they make a black roux to thicken their gumbo, which will also give it a very distinct flavor profile. Now, cake flour, it's important to note, has about 20% more thickening power than all-purpose or bread flour. But since all-purpose is the most commonly found version of flour in a kitchen, any recipe that calls for a roux is going to assume that you're using all-purpose flour to make the roux. Now, when incorporating roux, you want to use a white roux for milk-based sauces and gravies. This includes bechamel, which is milk-based, or a white gravy that commonly goes on biscuits and gravy. We'll use a white roux to be thickened. Blonde roux are good for subtle sauces and soups, like chicken noodle soup or sauce veloute. And a brown roux is going to be used for rich sauces and soups like gravy and espagnole. And it's this rich, dark brown roux that you'll be using to thicken your gravy on Thanksgiving Day. Now, brown roux, it's important to note, also has about 1/3 less thickening power than blonde and white roux. Now, roux can be added to a sauce warm or cold, but never hot straight from the pan. The roux will be so hot that when it hits the moisture of the sauce or soup, it'll break, negating its thickening power and causing lumps to form. And nobody likes lumpy sauces, especially gravy. Once roux is added to your sauce or soup, you need to whisk it vigorously to fully incorporate and then bring your sauce or soup to a simmer. Simmer for at least 20 minutes, and this will help to incorporate the flavors of the roux while also cooking out any raw flour taste, and then skim any scum that appears to float to the surface. So how much roux do you actually need to thicken a sauce or a soup? Assuming a water consistency, it's as easy as 3, 4, 5, and 6. So for 3 ounces of roux per quart, it's going to take a water consistency sauce to a thin or a light consistency, just a little bit more body. 4 ounces is going to give you about a medium consistency. 5 will give you a heavy sauce, and 6 will yield a heavy gravy. Now remember that the full thickening power of the roux will not be realized until you bring your sauce or your soup to a simmer. Now at that point, if you realize that your sauce or soup is too thick, you can always go back and thin it out with a water base, including stock, wine, or juice, just making sure that whatever you're using to thin your sauce, soup, or gravy with will match your desired finished flavor profile. Now, for more information, you can check out this episode's show notes by going to stellaculinary.com/SNS7 or our complete sauces and soups video index at stellaculinary.com/SNS.